In the vast darkness of space, the human research ship UES Pathfinder moved slowly through a field of asteroids near Proxima Centauri. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main view screen. Her calm face showed years of experience exploring the unknown parts of space. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Kevin Wright, the science officer. He looked up from his screen with concern in his eyes. "There's an energy reading I've never seen before." Laura walked over to his station. "What kind of reading?" "It seems alive," Kevin replied, adjusting some controls. "But it doesn't match anything in our database. It's coming from that large asteroid ahead of us." The asteroid looked ordinary from the outside, just a chunk of rock floating in space. But the energy signals told a different story. "Is it dangerous?" asked Nicole Chen, the pilot, her hands ready on the controls. Kevin shook his head. "I don't think so. Actually, the pattern looks like, well, if I didn't know better, I'd say it looks like distress." Laura considered this information carefully. First contact with alien life was always a delicate situation. The rules were clear. Observe but don't interfere unless absolutely necessary. "Can you get more details?" she asked. "One life form. Small. The energy pattern is fading in and out," Kevin reported. "Captain, I think whatever is in there might be dying." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what finding alien life would mean for humanity. It would change everything. Daniel Patel, the ship's engineer, spoke up from his station. "Captain, I could prepare a shuttle. We have the equipment to check it out safely." Laura took a deep breath. Her decision now would be recorded in history books. Protocol said they should report back to Earth first and wait for instructions. But if something was dying out there, "Prepare the shuttle," she ordered. "Dr. Winters, get your medical team ready. We'll need environmental suits and full quarantine procedures." Chief Medical Officer Paul Winters nodded and left the bridge immediately. "Kevin, you're with me," Laura said. "Alicia, you too. I want someone from security on this mission." Officer Alicia Morgan stood straighter. "Yes, Captain." As the team prepared for the mission, Laura recorded her log. Captain's log, stardate 2187-4. "We've encountered an unknown energy signature within an asteroid near Proxima Centauri. All signs indicate it could be our first contact with extraterrestrial life. I've decided to investigate personally." 30 minutes later, Laura and her team boarded the shuttle. As they approached the asteroid, they could see it wasn't solid rock after all. There was an opening, almost like a cave or a tunnel. "It looks artificial," Daniel said as he piloted the shuttle closer. "The edges are too smooth to be natural." Laura felt her heart beating faster. "Take us in, slowly. Keep communications open with the Pathfinder." The shuttle's lights cut through the darkness as they entered the asteroid. The tunnel was just wide enough for their small craft. After a minute of careful navigation, they reached a larger chamber inside. And there, in the center of the chamber, was something none of them had expected to see. A small creature curled up in what looked like a nest made of strange metallic materials. It wasn't moving much, but they could see it breathing. "It's a baby," Alicia whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Some kind of alien baby." The creature's scales shimmered between dark blue and black. It had 6 limbs and a face that reminded Laura of Earth's big cats, but with features no Earth animal possessed. Looking around the chamber, Daniel pointed out pieces of advanced technology embedded in the walls. "This isn't just a random asteroid. This is some kind of escape pod or lifeboat." The reality of what they were seeing hit Laura all at once. This wasn't just an alien life form. This was a child, and it had been left here, alone, to die. "We can't leave it," she said firmly, making another decision that would change history. "Prepare to bring it aboard." Laura and her team moved cautiously inside the asteroid. They wore protective suits that covered them from head to toe. Dr. Paul Winters carefully approached the small creature with a scanner in his hand. "Its life signs are weak," Paul said quietly. "It's severely malnourished and dehydrated." The creature's eyes opened as they got closer. They were a striking golden color with vertical pupils, like a cat's. Despite its weakened state, those eyes tracked the humans with clear intelligence. "It's afraid," Alicia said. She moved slowly, trying to appear less threatening. Daniel was examining the technology around the chamber. "This is incredible," he said. "These systems are more advanced than anything we've ever seen, but they've been damaged." He pointed to several areas where metal was bent and torn. "This wasn't an accident. Someone did this deliberately." Laura frowned. "They wanted it to die." The small creature made a soft noise, somewhere between a growl and a whimper. It tried to push itself up on its 6 limbs, but didn't have the strength. Its scales rippled with color, changing from midnight blue to deep purple. "It's defensive posturing," Kevin suggested. "Like how Earth animals make themselves look bigger when threatened." Paul ran more scans. "Its biology is fascinating. The internal structure has similarities to both reptiles and mammals from Earth, but with differences I can't even begin to understand. It has a highly developed brain." Laura knelt down a few feet away from the creature. It was clearly a juvenile of its species, with proportions similar to how Earth predator cubs looked. A larger head relative to its body, with not fully developed features. "We need to decide quickly," Paul said. "If we're going to help it, we need to get it to the medical bay soon." Laura tapped her communication device. "Bennett to Pathfinder. We found a juvenile alien life form. It appears to have been abandoned and is in critical condition. We're bringing it aboard." After a moment, a voice replied. "Captain, this violates first contact protocols. We should consult with Earth Command first." "There's no time," Laura replied firmly. "By the time we get authorization, it will be dead. Prepare the quarantine bay." Paul carefully approached the creature with a small container. "This is a sedative gas. It should help keep it calm during transport without harming it." The creature watched them with those intelligent golden eyes. For a moment, Laura thought she felt something, a touch on her mind, like a question or a plea. Then the creature relaxed slightly, as if it had somehow understood their intentions. "I think it knows we're trying to help," Alicia whispered. Once the creature was sedated, they carefully placed it on a stretcher. Daniel collected some samples of the technology and materials from the nest. "This wasn't just any escape pod," he said as they carried the creature to their shuttle. "The design suggests it was meant for someone important. Look at these markings. They almost look like symbols of royalty or status." Back on the Pathfinder, a secure quarantine area had been prepared. The medical team waited as the shuttle docked. When they brought the creature into the medical bay, gasps filled the room. In the proper lighting, they could see the creature more clearly. Its scales were beautiful, shifting colors with each breath. It had 6 limbs, each ending in what looked like highly developed claws. Its face was both alien and somehow familiar, with features that reminded them of the most efficient predators of Earth. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Nickel asked, watching through the quarantine glass. Laura looked at the small, abandoned creature. "We're doing what humans have always done, helping those in need, regardless of where they come from." As the medical team began their work to save the alien cub's life, none of them realized that this single act of compassion would soon change the course of human history forever. Laura stood in her office, facing the holographic projection of Admiral George Harrison. His face looked stern, with deep lines around his mouth showing his disapproval. "Captain Bennett, you've violated multiple protocols by bringing an unknown alien life form aboard your ship," the Admiral said. His voice was calm but cold. "With respect, sir, it was dying," Laura replied. "It's a child." The Admiral shook his head. "You don't know that. You don't know anything about this species. It could be carrying diseases. It could be dangerous when it recovers. Dr. Winters has run every test possible. It poses no biological threat to the crew," Laura explained. She pulled up the medical reports on her screen and sent them to the Admiral. George Harrison scanned the data briefly. "These readings are Unusual. Dr. Winters says its cellular structure is unlike anything we've encountered before. Yes, sir. Paul believes it has remarkable healing abilities. Its body seems to adapt quickly to new environments. The Admiral's frown deepened. All the more reason to be cautious. What do you plan to do with it? Laura had been thinking about this question since they brought the creature aboard. We're going to help it recover. Then we'll try to learn more about its species and why it was abandoned. And if you discover it belongs to a hostile species, one that might pose a threat to Earth, then we'll deal with that situation when we reach it, Laura said firmly. But I won't condemn a child based on what its species might be. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. You have 48 hours to make a final assessment. If there's any sign of danger, you will terminate contact. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Laura replied, though the thought of abandoning the creature now made her stomach tighten. After the Admiral's hologram disappeared, Laura sat at her desk and reviewed the reports. The creature was recovering faster than expected. It had started taking the nutrient solutions Paul had developed for it. There was a knock at her door, and Paul Winters entered. The doctor looked tired but excited. Captain, you need to see this, he said, handing her a datapad. Laura looked at the screen, showing scans of the creature's brain. What am I looking at? Its brain activity is off the charts, Paul explained. The patterns suggest extremely high intelligence, possibly even telepathic abilities. Telepathic? Laura asked, surprised. Yes, several crew members who've been working in the quarantine area have reported unusual sensations, like someone was touching their minds. Laura remembered feeling something similar when they first found the creature. Is it trying to communicate? I think so, Paul nodded. But there's something else. Look at its metabolic rate. The data showed that the creature's body was rapidly healing and growing. How fast do you think it will mature? Laura asked. Hard to say with an unknown species, but at this rate, much faster than a human child. It seems designed to adapt and survive against incredible odds. Laura stood up. I want to see it. They walked to the quarantine bay together. Through the clear barrier, they could see the creature. It was already looking stronger, its scales now a healthy deep blue with streaks of silver. When it saw Laura, it moved closer to the barrier, watching her with those intelligent golden eyes. Laura placed her hand against the clear wall, and the creature mirrored her, placing one of its 6 limbed appendages in the same spot. Hello, Laura said softly. To her shock, the creature's mouth moved, making sounds that were rough but recognizable. Ha! Hello. Paul gasped. It's mimicking you. It's trying to speak. Laura felt a mixture of wonder and concern. This creature was learning at an incredible rate. If it continued to develop this quickly, what would it become? We need to decide what to tell the Admiral, Paul said quietly. His deadline is tomorrow. Laura kept her eyes on the creature, who was still watching her intently. We tell him the truth. This isn't just an animal. It's a person. And we're going to help it. Dr. Samantha Rivera sat quietly in the quarantine bay, a datapad in her hands. As the ship's xenobiologist, she had been given the task of studying the alien cub. But instead of running tests, she had spent the last 5 hours simply being present. The creature watched her from the other side of the room. It had grown stronger over the past few days. Its midnight blue scales now shimmered with health, and it moved with increasing confidence on its 6 limbs. It's all about establishing trust, Samantha explained through the comm to Captain Bennett, who was observing from the control room. If it really is telepathic, then it can sense our intentions. I want it to know we mean no harm. The creature tilted its head, as if listening to their conversation. Its golden eyes never blinked. How long do you think this will take? Laura asked. As long as necessary, Samantha replied calmly. We can't rush this. 3 more hours passed. Samantha remained still, occasionally making notes but mostly just existing in the same space as the creature. Finally, she placed a small bowl on the floor and pushed it halfway between them. "This is a protein compound Dr. Winters created," she explained softly to the creature. "It contains nutrients your body needs." The creature's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air. Slowly, with movements that reminded Samantha of both cats and lizards, it approached the bowl. Its grace was mesmerizing, each motion perfectly controlled and efficient. It stopped at the bowl, examined the contents, then looked up at Samantha. She felt a gentle pressure in her mind, like a question. "Yes, it's for you," she said. The creature began to eat. After finishing, it moved a few steps closer to Samantha before retreating to its corner. "Progress," Laura commented through the comm. Over the next 3 days, this routine continued. Each time, the creature came a little closer. On the 4th day, it approached Samantha directly after eating. "Hello," Samantha said softly. The creature made a rumbling sound in its throat. Then, to everyone's shock, it spoke. "Hello." Its voice was deep and resonant, like distant thunder, but the word was perfectly clear. "It's learning our language much faster than we anticipated," Kevin Wright said, joining Laura in the observation room. "The brain scans show incredible neural activity." By the end of the week, the creature was speaking in simple sentences. It seemed to absorb language by simply listening to the crew's conversations. Dr. Winters wanted to run more tests, but Samantha insisted on building trust first. On the 10th day, Samantha held out her hand. The creature hesitated, then extended one of its limbs. When they touched, Samantha felt a flood of emotions that weren't her own: fear, confusion, loneliness, and a desperate desire to understand. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe here." The creature withdrew its limb and looked directly into her eyes. "Abandoned," it said, its first unprompted word. "You were abandoned?" Samantha asked gently. The creature nodded, a human gesture it had learned from watching them. "Left to die." "Why?" Samantha asked. "Who left you there?" The creature seemed to struggle with this. "Others. All others. Fear. They feared you. Your kind." Again, the creature nodded. "Apex. Predator." Laura, watching from the observation room, felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever species this young creature belonged to, it was clearly feared by other intelligent beings in the galaxy. "Do you have a name?" Samantha asked. The creature made a series of sounds no human throat could reproduce: clicks, rumbles, and high-pitched tones. "We can't say that," Samantha admitted with a small smile. "Would you mind if we gave you a name we can pronounce?" The creature considered this, then nodded. "How about Nova?" Samantha suggested. "It means new star in our language." "Nova," the creature repeated, its golden eyes brightening. "New. Beginning." Later, in the captain's meeting room, the senior officers gathered to discuss their findings. "It's learning at an incredible rate," Kevin reported. "At this pace, it will be fully fluent in English within weeks." "But what do we do with it?" Nicole asked. "We can't keep it in quarantine forever." Laura looked thoughtful. "We need to learn more about its species and why it was abandoned. And we need to decide what to tell Earth Command when we check in next week." "We tell them the truth," Samantha said firmly. "Nova isn't just some animal. Nova is a person who needs our help." The UES Pathfinder shook violently as another energy blast hit its shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the crew held onto their stations to stay upright. Shield strength down to 60%. Frank Wilson called out from the tactical station. His face was tense as he worked the controls. Captain Laura Bennett gripped the arms of her command chair. "Nicole, evasive pattern delta. We need to put some distance between us and those ships." At the helm, Nicole's fingers moved quickly across the controls. The Pathfinder turned sharply, narrowly avoiding another blast of energy. "3 ships pursuing us, Captain," Frank reported. "They're Zreek warships based on their energy signatures, heavily armed." Laura looked down at Nova, who stood beside her chair on the bridge. In just 3 weeks, Nova had grown significantly. Now standing at about 4 feet tall, Nova's midnight blue scales had developed intricate patterns that seemed to shift with emotion. "They want me," Nova said. The young alien's voice had deepened, now sounding like rolling thunder despite its still juvenile body. "They will not stop." 3 days earlier, the Pathfinder had received a transmission in an unknown language. Nova had translated it, a demand to surrender the abomination, or face destruction. Within hours, the first Zreek ship had appeared, and the chase had begun. "Why are they calling you an abomination?" Laura asked, keeping her voice calm despite the situation. Nova's golden eyes fixed on the view screen showing the pursuing ships. "I am Kenner, the last of my kind. My people were feared." Another blast rocked the ship. Shields at 45%. Frank warned, "We can't take much more of this." "Kevin, what do we know about this Zreek?" Laura asked her science officer. Kevin Wright checked his readings. "Very little. They're an unknown species to human records. Their technology seems more advanced than ours in some areas, particularly weapons." "They led the coalition," Nova said quietly. "The ones who hunted my kind to extinction." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Over the past weeks, they had learned pieces of Nova's story. The Kenner had been apex predators, not just physically but technologically. Their abilities had frightened other species, who had formed a coalition to eliminate them. Why would they fear a child? Samantha asked from her station. She had become Nova's closest companion. "Because of what I will become," Nova replied simply. "My kind grow powerful. Very powerful." Laura made a quick decision. "Nickel, set course for the Veil Nebula. We'll use the radiation and gas clouds to hide our signature." "Captain," Kevin interrupted, "the nebula is largely unexplored. Navigation will be difficult." "Better than being destroyed," Laura replied. "Maximum speed, Nickel." The Pathfinder surged forward, pushing its engines to their limits. The 3 Zreek ships adjusted course, staying in pursuit. Nova watched the tactical display with interest. "They are determined. They believe they protect the galaxy from me." "Are they right?" Laura asked directly, meeting Nova's golden eyes. Nova considered the question. "My people were predators, but I was raised by humans. I learned from you. I choose what I become." The sincerity in those alien eyes convinced Laura. She nodded and turned back to the view screen. "All hands, prepare for extended evasion procedures," she announced ship-wide. "We're going into the nebula." As the Pathfinder approached the colorful gases of the Veil Nebula, Laura received a private message from Admiral Harrison. "Captain Bennett, our long-range sensors have detected your situation," the Admiral said, his face grim. "You've involved Earth in what appears to be an interspecies conflict. Return the alien creature to its pursuers immediately." Laura looked at Nova, who was helping Kevin analyze the nebula composition to find the safest path. "With respect, Admiral," Laura replied quietly, "we don't abandon our own." Before the Admiral could respond, Laura cut the transmission. She had made her choice. Nova was under her protection now, and she would face whatever consequences came from that decision. Entering the nebula in 30 seconds, Nickel announced as the beautiful, swirling colors grew larger on the view screen. Behind them, the Zreek ships continued their relentless pursuit, determined to destroy what they feared without ever trying to understand it. 6 months had passed since the UES Pathfinder entered the unexplored regions beyond the Veil Nebula. The ship and crew had adapted to life on the run, always staying one step ahead of the pursuing Zreek forces. Nova had changed dramatically during this time. No longer the small, frightened cub they had found, Nova now stood almost 6 feet tall. The alien's body had matured rapidly, developing into a powerful form that combined grace with obvious strength. Nova's scales now shifted colors based on mood, ranging from deep midnight blue when calm to an intense silvery black when excited or concerned. The ship's library had become Nova's favorite place. Here, Eric Carter, the ship's historian, spent hours teaching Earth's history and cultures. Nova absorbed knowledge with incredible speed, often reading entire databases in a single sitting. Your species has a fascinating history, Nova said one evening as they finished reviewing ancient human civilizations. So much conflict, yet so much growth. Eric nodded. Humans have made many mistakes. We've fought wars over differences that seem trivial now. But we've learned from our past. Nova's scales rippled with a thoughtful blue-green pattern. The historical records about first contact situations are particularly interesting. Humans have met 15 other species, yet you never joined coalitions against any of them. That's not our way, Eric explained. We judge individuals, not species. Nova moved to the window, looking out at the stars streaking by. After months of running, they were now in a region of space no human had ever visited. The records about my people are incomplete, Nova said suddenly. I've searched your entire database, but there's little information about the Canare. Eric closed the history file they'd been studying. We hadn't encountered your species before finding you. Everything we know comes from what you've told us and what we've learned from the Zreek transmissions. Nova turned back to face Eric. Why did humans choose to protect me? Your species had no obligation. The Zreek would have left you alone if you had surrendered me. Eric considered the question carefully. It was one that many crew members had asked themselves over the past months. Humanity learned long ago that judging individuals by their species or origins leads to darkness, he finally said. We've made terrible mistakes following that path. Nova's head tilted, a gesture picked up from the humans. The Zreek say the Canare were monsters, that we conquered worlds and consumed their resources without care. Perhaps they were right to hunt us. Were you a monster when we found you? Eric asked gently. Nova's scales darkened slightly. No, I was afraid. Then you deserve the chance to choose your own path, Eric said. That's what Captain Bennett believes. That's what most of us believe. Nova was quiet for a moment, processing this. Some of your crew fear me. I can sense it. Fear often comes from not understanding, Eric admitted. You're very different from us, and you're growing more powerful every day. Your abilities are intimidating. Over the months, Nova had displayed several unusual talents. The alien could move objects without touching them, sense emotions at a distance, and had once prevented a serious engine malfunction by somehow manipulating energy fields directly. I would never harm the crew, Nova said firmly. You are my family now. The ship's communication system activated. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately, came Captain Bennett's voice. Zreek vessels detected on long-range sensors. Nova's scales shifted to alert silver black. They found us again. Eric stood quickly. We should go. As they walked to the bridge together, Eric noticed how the crew reacted to Nova now. 6 months ago, many had been afraid or suspicious. Now most nodded in greeting. Some even smiled. When they reached the bridge, Laura Bennett was studying tactical displays. Her face was tired but determined. They're coming from 2 directions this time, she said as they entered. 5 ships total. Nova moved to stand beside her. Captain, I believe it's time I helped more directly. I've been studying energy manipulation techniques. I might be able to mask our engine signature completely. Laura looked at the alien she had saved, now grown into a powerful and intelligent being. Show us what you can do, Nova. The UES Pathfinder drifted silently in the shadow of a dying red giant star. Its engines were powered down to minimum levels. On the bridge, the crew worked in tense silence. 5 Zreek battlecruisers had surrounded them in a wide formation, cutting off all escape routes. They're hailing us again, Captain, said Frank Wilson from the communications station. Laura nodded. Put it through. The main screen flickered and showed a Zreek commander. The alien had rough, gray skin that looked like stone and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. Human vessel, the Zreek commander said. You harbor the abomination. This is your final warning. Surrender the Canaire, or we will destroy your ship. Laura stood tall, facing the screen. The being you refer to is under our protection. We don't surrender our own. The Zreek commander's 4 eyes narrowed. Then you have chosen destruction. You have 3 of your Earth hours to reconsider. The screen went dark. Nova stood at the center of the bridge. In the past months, Nova had continued to grow and now stood nearly 7 feet tall. The alien scales shimmered with midnight blue and purple patterns. All 6 limbs were fully developed, with the upper pair now functioning like human arms. I cannot allow this, Nova said, looking around at the crew. You have protected me, taught me, and shown me kindness. I will not be the cause of your deaths. We're not giving up, Laura said firmly. We'll find a way out of this. Nova's scales darkened with determination. I believe I can help us escape. The Canaire were feared because of our abilities to manipulate energy in space. I've been practicing in secret. Kevin Wright looked up from his science station. What kind of abilities are we talking about? My people could bend reality itself, Nova explained. It's why we were hunted. The other species feared what we could do. The bridge crew exchanged nervous looks. This was the first time Nova had openly discussed such powers. Can you really do that? Nickel asked from the helm station. I believe so, Nova replied. I have felt the ability growing stronger as I matured. I need to try. Laura studied Nova carefully. What's your plan? When the Zreek attack, I will attempt to create a space folding effect. It would move the Pathfinder instantly to a different location, far from here. Paul Winters frowned. That sounds like theoretical jump drive technology. We've never been able to make it work. The Canaire didn't need technology for this, Nova explained. It was a natural ability, like breathing is for you. Laura considered their options. The Pathfinder's engines couldn't outrun the Zreek ships. Their weapons were outmatched. This might be their only chance. We'll try it, she decided, but only when we have no other choice. The 3 Earth hours passed quickly. The Zreek ships moved closer, tightening their formation around the Pathfinder. They're charging weapons, Frank reported, his voice tense. Laura nodded to Nova. It's time. Nova moved to the center of the bridge and spread all 6 limbs wide. The alien scales began to glow with an inner light that grew brighter by the second. I need to focus on our destination, Nova said, voice strained, a place far from here, beyond their reach. The first Zreek energy blast hit the Pathfinder's shields, making the ship shake violently. Shields at 60%, Frank called out. They're firing again. Nova's body now radiated light so bright that the crew had to shield their eyes. The space around Nova seemed to bend and warp, like looking through rippling water. I can see it, Nova whispered. A yellow star with blue planets. Safe. Another blast hit the ship. Warning alarms blared across the bridge. Shields failing, Frank shouted. Nova's eyes opened wide, glowing like twin suns. Now. Energy surged through the ship. Every crew member felt a strange sensation, as if they were being stretched in impossible directions. For a moment, reality itself seemed to fold around them. The view screen showed the Zreek ships firing again. Then suddenly, they disappeared. In their place was empty space, filled with unfamiliar stars. Where are we? Laura asked, looking around at her stunned crew. Kevin checked his instruments, his face showing disbelief. According to these readings, we're in a completely different galaxy. In the center of the bridge, Nova collapsed to the floor, scales dimmed to a dull gray. Samantha rushed forward to check on the alien. Nova's alive, she reported, just exhausted. Laura looked at the unfamiliar stars on the view screen. They had escaped the Zreek, but now they were farther from home than any humans had ever traveled. Set course for that yellow star Nova mentioned, she ordered Nicole. Let's see where our friend has brought us. The third planet from the yellow star had become home to the crew of the UES Pathfinder. They called it Hope. With blue oceans, green lands, and a breathable atmosphere, it was remarkably like Earth. 1 year had passed since Nova had transported them across the galaxies to this safe haven. Laura Bennett walked along the shoreline of a large freshwater lake. The settlement they had built spread out behind her, a mix of buildings made from the Pathfinder's materials and local resources. Nearby, human children played in the shallow water, their laughter filling the air. Nova walked beside Laura. The alien had reached full maturity now, standing 9 feet tall with iridescent scales that changed colors with the light. Despite Nova's intimidating appearance, the children showed no fear. One small boy waved excitedly, and Nova waved back with one of 6 powerful limbs. "The new communications array will be finished next week," Laura said. "We might be able to send a message back to Earth." Nova nodded. "The distance is vast, but I believe it will work. I can help strengthen the signal." They stopped to watch the sunset over the water. The sky turned beautiful shades of orange and purple, reflecting on the lake's surface. "Do you think they'll come looking for us?" Laura asked. The shriek. "No," Nova replied confidently. "We are beyond their reach. Even if they could follow, it would take them centuries using their technology." Laura smiled. The past year had been challenging but rewarding. The colony was thriving. 53 crew members had chosen to stay on Hope, while 20 others would soon depart on the repaired Pathfinder to return to Earth and share their discoveries. "I received 17 new applications for the Learning Center today," Nova said. Nova had started teaching the colony's children and adults about science, space, and the many species that existed in the universe. "You've become quite popular as a teacher," Laura noted. Nova's scales shifted to a pleased blue-green pattern. "I enjoy sharing knowledge." The children are especially eager to learn. They continued walking along the shore. In the distance, they could see the Pathfinder on its landing pad, being prepared for the journey home. "My people were apex predators," Nova said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "The strongest, the most advanced species in our region of space. Perhaps that is why they became feared. They forgot what it meant to protect rather than dominate." Laura looked up at the towering alien who had once been a small, abandoned cub. "You'll forge a different legacy." "Because of humans," Nova replied. "You found an apex predator's cub and saw not a monster to fear, but a child to protect. My people could have learned much from yours." A small girl ran up to them, holding a colorful stone she had found. Without hesitation, she held it up to Nova. "Look what I found, Teacher Nova," she said excitedly. Nova knelt down, making the huge body smaller to meet the child at eye level. "It's beautiful, Lily. Do you know what kind of stone this is?" As Nova gently explained the geology of the planet to the delighted child, Laura watched with pride. This was why they had made the right choice all those months ago, not because of what Nova could do, but because of who Nova could become. Later that evening, the colony gathered for a farewell dinner for those returning to Earth. Eric Carter, who would be leading the journey home, stood to make a speech. "We'll carry your stories back to Earth," he promised. "We'll tell them about hope, about this new beginning we found. And most importantly, we'll tell them about Nova and the lesson we've learned. That compassion toward those all others have abandoned can change the course of history." The crew raised their glasses in a toast as the Pathfinder's lights shone brightly against the darkening sky. Tomorrow it would begin its long journey home, carrying a message of hope and a story of friendship that crossed the boundaries of species and galaxies. Nova looked around at the humans who had become family and felt a deep sense of belonging. The abandoned cub had found not just sanctuary, but a purpose. Here, far from those who had feared the Conair, a new kind of legacy could begin, one built on protection rather than domination, teaching rather than conquering. In the night sky above Hope, stars shimmered like Nova's scales, a reminder of all the possibilities that still awaited them.